Okay, so this is chapter 10, Ante up, and I gotta say some shit before I start. Number one, this is probably gonna be a long one. I feel like the last few have actually been kind of short, like all like 35 minutes ish or less. I think chapter 8 was only like 28 minutes. Maybe I'm making that up. I'm like, no, I have like 6 pages worth of notes. I have a lot of shit I want to talk about. I apologize ahead of time, and of course, as always, the more I talk about how long it's going to be, the longer it ends up getting. But I at least wanted to get that out of the way, but you saw the link to the video, and you possibly clicked on it. Thank you. So you know how long it's going to be. You know, and I actually don't at the moment. So that's thing number one. Thing number two, I'm really tired this morning. I've had a little bit of weird car trouble. Like, there's a problem with my headlight. So I had to take it in. It's like first thing in the morning. So I'm a little bit tired. So if I seem a little out of it, if I start yawning just like that, I apologize for that too. But because this video was so long and I've got like 3 hours before I start my shift, like I know I have time. Hopefully this is not 3 hours. I kind of doubt that. This is probably like an hour and a half, something like that. Anyways, I apologize for that. The other thing is just like full transparency. I haven't even recorded chapter 9 yet. Chapter 9's about 2 pages. I could get through it really lickety split quick. But because, like I said, like this is going to be a long one and I know I have time, I want to go ahead and get chapter 10 done. Then, depending on time, maybe I'll get chapter 9 done today. I would imagine probably tomorrow morning or Friday. I haven't started chapter 11 yet, but I can catch up on Project Horizons, and then I can keep reading Project Horizons. So all that out of the way, let's talk about my overall thoughts on Ante Up. Like I said, this is just a chapter that I had a lot of shit to talk about, which for me is very exciting, and it's not all negative. There's a long chunk that's going to be very negative, but most of that is not to do with Blackjack. There's a little bit there, but for the most part, I'm talking about Blackjack, Glory, and P2-1. I'm like, no. I have a lot of good things to say because this whole second third of the story, I think, has been really good. It's overall pretty lot on plot, but I think we do get a lot of, interesting shit from our 3 main leads. There is a good amount of big picture moments to talk about, and this is the chapter that gives a proper introduction to Macintosh's Marauders. We've heard of Macintosh previously. We've seen him in a memory orb. Sorry, brain was stopping for a second. We saw a poster advertising the Marauders. It was in chapter 7 or 8. It was somewhere in there in Megamart. I believe it was the end of chapter 7. But now we actually meet them. I don't remember if we got names for everybody, because I don't remember if Vanities was said, or if Echoes was said. But I believe actually, I don't think Apple Snacks was said. Anyways, we get the proper introduction to them, which means finally I can talk about them. And like I said, there's a big chunk of the video that's going to be pretty negative because I'm just not a fan of the Marauders and their storyline. But we'll get to that in a bit. The other thing, which is a housekeeping thing, I have decided I'm not going to count overall kills in the story. I'm just going to count Blackjacks. The reason for that is because there's so many moments in the story where I've noticed, because I don't have a visual representation, it's really hard to tell what's going on. I'll be like, oh yeah, there's a fuck ton of bones. I'm like, well, I don't know what that means. You can have dozens of bones, but it doesn't necessarily mean there are dozens of bodies. So, I mean, there's dozens of bones in just my body, Or, in that, in the school, there's several heads, so what does that mean? I mean, shout out to Jelinski, I can just say 7, which is what I did, but that's not necessarily accurate. And you're like, all right, Big Macintosh is shooting with his rifle, every shot's a kill, cool. How many times did he shoot? You don't really tell me that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying these parts of the story are written bad. I don't think that's the case, but I don't think they're conducive to doing a kill count. So I feel like it's probably for the best, because, like, there's gonna be 70 more of these to count. I'd rather just say, let me cut the losses now, because I don't think this part of the experiment is working. Because even if I just count, like, obvious kills or named characters, that's not accurate to what's happening. But I feel like counting the kills that Blackjack is responsible for, and I do phrase it like that because there's times when, like, if Glory kills somebody, but Blackjack is the one that brought them to this scenario, I count that as part of Blackjack's kill, like a conspiracy situation. But something like the slaves that Lancer kills, Blackjack feels responsible. I do not put that on Blackjack whatsoever. Again, if you want to look at it as a conspiracy, this is someone going above and beyond the conspiracy and doing their own shit. This was not part of the agreement. That doesn't fall on P21, doesn't fall on Glory, does not fall on Blackjack. So, with all that being said, let's talk about the basic plot of Ante Up. We've got Blackjack undergoing very intense surgery after Lancer, like, fucked up her spine. She's given a memory orb to use as anesthesia. And honestly, like, that's a really clever idea. That's really cool. And the orb that she sees is Macintosh's Marauders. They're defending this area in Huffington. She is in Stonewing's body, and Stonewing dies. As if you know the story, you know later you end up finding out that Stonewing wasn't killed. He ended up being captured. He was used as part of Project Chimera, and he ends up becoming Gorgon. I really don't remember when we learned that. There's a part of me that says, like, is it Hippocratic? Because that's where that shit would have taken place. Like, I could see the orb being there, but I'm also like, no. It would be at, I don't remember what it was called, but there's this one area that Blackjack finds that has the lockers of all the different members of the Marauders. And they're all, like, locked with a pass. There might be, like, one or two that aren't password protected. But it's after learning more about them, she'll go back, input their password, and get some shit. Like, that's when she gets penance from Psalm. That's when she gets duty and sacrifice after learning about Vanity. I would assume Stonewings is one of those. And that's when she's like, oh, shit, he's Gorgon. Oh, no, he's Gorgon. So shit like that. That might also be when she gets Deuce, because I know she gets a memory orb from him, like the chapter or two after she kills him. He might give her the password there, and then it's like, all right, this is our area. Go check my locker. Blah 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 blah. Anyways, sorry. Like that's that shit. She sees the orb with Stonewing and all that crap. Blackjack is having an existential crisis. Take a shot. But she's having an existential crisis about all the lives that she's cost, all the lives she's taken, with the slaves that Lancer killed just being one more sin to the pile. I guess 11 more sins to the pile. It's more chips to play and gamble away, because this is when the dealer is introduced, and I find that really interesting, because the dealer's whole thing is that he's Echo, and I think they make a point later that Echo didn't join the party in his own weird way until after it was after they decrypted EC1101. So that's technically not the case because he's here. I guess it's after they decrypt EC1101 is when the dealer's personality changes, and it's not just like the gambler saying Ante up and shit. He's really actively talking to her and about the secrets of the wasteland and blah, 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 blah. We'll get to that when we get to that, which will be in this chapter. Blackjack talks to P21. He shares his guilt regarding the slaves, because he's like, dude, I saw the way Lancer was looking at them. I knew something was off, but I didn't act, and I regret it. This is on me. And then Blackjack's like, dude, it's not on you. It's on me, because I'm the one that agreed with the plan. I'm the one that took him. I could have blown his brains out, but it didn't seem like a good idea because he wasn't like a threat at the time. This is on me. And then they get into like a little mini fight, but they kind of also up their social link at the same time going through it. Glory shares a little bit of her history, that there's a member of her family that's very likely a Dashite. She doesn't outright say it, but it's kind of implied. She talks about how she really wanted to join the volunteer corps because she wanted to help. There was her, I don't know, like her doctor, like her, what's the word I want? I don't want to say her master. That doesn't sound right. But she was the apprentice to this guy. Sorry, like, I'm just not that superior senpai. I don't know. Anyways, there was a doctor, mentor. Thank you. That's the word I wanted. Her mentor, who was this very good doctor that, I guess, pun intended, took her under his wing. And Glory was like this prodigy, super good at medicine, but she wanted to go to the surface. The two of them had a long fight. They had a bad spat. He wanted to make up, and Glory's like, no, fuck you, you're a piece of shit. She's like, dude, I wish I could go back. I wish I could go back and talk to him and make up. Like, I probably will never see him again. I hate this fucking place. It's like Pleakley at the end of Lilo and Stitch. I hate this planet. Like, I wish I had never come here. And then P21's like, I'm glad you're here. You saved my friends. And then later Blackjack, I think she's like, Glory, I'm so sorry you're here, but you have helped me, dude. I appreciate it. Tumbleweed, who's one of the Peckos that has Dusty Trails' buddy. Blackjack sees her go Raider. Wait, what chapter was that? No, sorry, like, that was this chapter. There was a chapter where Glory, like, figured out more of the Raider virus. And I had made a point, like, I want to talk about it more here, and I don't know if I did. That's either a chapter 9 thing. Hold up. I've got notes in front. I'm sorry. I just want to check real quick. Like, is this something I talk about in chapter 9? Because if so, I will. If not, kind of don't want to make this longer than I already am. Yeah, I don't think it's in... I think I was supposed to talk about it in chapter 8, and I just completely fucking forgot to. Okay, so I'm going to keep this part pretty short, talking about the virus. So, I might have mentioned it in a previous chapter, but the short version... In the original Fallout Equestria, Raiders, just the people who are pieces of shit, super violent, massacring, and all that shit, there's not a reason given for why people do this until the end of the story. With the kind of implication being, the wasteland's a shithole, you kind of got to do whatever you can to survive, and for some people, the more they have to do it, the more that it's almost like, I need to enjoy this, or else I'm gonna go crazy. So they go crazy, you know? At the end of the story, Little Pip has the, like, just kind of musing that I think every pony has a virtue, and a Raider is what happens when you lose your virtue. When you lose your way, when you lose, like, your inner light and guidance, when you lose your spark. That is what you become. You're not really a person anymore. You have nothing guiding you. You're just violent. You're just evil. And Project Horizons, because it's my understanding, it started before Fallout Equestria ended, did its own thing and said, Raiders are basically zombies. It is a sickness. It is a virus. There's gangsters, like there's people who do violent shit. There are genuinely bad people, but the jabbering assholes that are eating themselves and eating other ponies and whatnot, they have an actual sickness. I will be honest, I don't love it, and the reason I don't love it is solely because I had already read the original. I was like, I like this. I feel like Raiders have a very strong thematic element to the story, even if it's not really explored until the end. It's something you can kind of still see. And the idea of a pony having a virtue in their guiding light is something that is incredibly important in the story, not only in the elements of harmony, but because that's one of Little Pip's big character arcs is, what the hell is mine? And it is not until the end of the story she realizes, this is what it is. This is what it always has been. And then Horizon's just kind of saying, nah, they're zombies. Didn't like that. But, stepping away, looking at it in a vacuum, I don't like it as much because I like the thematic element of the original story. But the virus is still kind of cool. Like, yeah, we already have zombies in the form of ghouls, or like feral ghouls specifically, but also this is kind of fun and interesting. And we get some great shit with it later when we get to 22. So it's not like, man, this is an idea that just takes the piss out of the original and it's on its own. It's just dumb and it's shitty. I prefer the way it's handled in the original, but I can say I kind of like what Horizons does with it, although it's not preferred. I feel like I should go ahead and say all that. But this is a scene where Tumbleweed is succumbing to the virus, and it's genuinely pretty scary. Of her just, like, begging Blackjack, essentially, to put her down. Like, please don't let me do this. I'm scared. Like, I have this craving to eat meat, and I don't want to do that. She starts biting herself and then lunges at Blackjack, and Blackjack kills her, which is her one kill for the chapter. It's... I think it's a very effective moment. And of course, while this goes on Blackjack's count, it's not one that I genuinely hold against her in any regard. Like, no. This person tried to kill you. There was no one else in the room, and you had to do what you could to defend yourself. You get no beef from me, Blackjack, but the count is the count. The law is the law, you know? Also, Blackjack learns her telekinesis bullets during this scene, which is something I've always thought was like, okay, that's cool, but do I even buy that? Like, Little Pip's whole thing was she was this master of telekinesis, and she couldn't do that. Is this supposed to be one of those, hey, I mean, the master of telekinesis couldn't do this, but Blackjack could. Blackjack's a better character, or is it just a deadass, I just thought it was cool, and I wanted to give it to my character? Because it is cool. It is cool. Blackjack and the Sentinels are going to leave Brimstone's Fall. They want to make kind of a showing of it that Blackjack is, walking, able to leave under her own power, even though she can barely fucking stand. Before she does, P21 and the slaves give her a gift, which is, hey, so we took off all the bomb collars and we put them on the mine operator and we rigged it to a button. You want to push the button, Blackjack? And she goes, no! What the fuck is wrong with you all? Like, look, I get it. Y'all hate him for what he did, and you're not wrong to do so. But this doesn't feel right. He's been beaten. You're free. You don't have to do this. Look, I'm not gonna stop you. Because I don't feel like I really have the right to stop you from doing this. Because he wronged you, not me. But please, we need to do better. Because it's shit like this that caused the wasteland. It's shit like this that causes slavery and, violence and evil and all that kind of shit. We have to be kind. We have to do better. And then Blackjack turns to leave, and then she hears the explosion. Is there anything else? Yeah, and then that's basically how the chapter ends. It's kind of like after that, the Sentinels get together and kind of start walking to the next location. And I don't remember what the location is, because I don't know if 11 is when they get to Chapel? Because I don't remember if when Blackjack first got to Chapel, if she had her crew with her, if she was by herself. Like, there's the fight with Leo, but I think, I want to say Blackjack was by herself when that happened. I could completely be making that up. Did Blackjack have, or did Leo have someone else with him? Because I don't think it was just him. I want to say it was like Capricorn or some shit, who was, it was some like trap art, because Leo is the hunter. I think he had like a trap artist with him. It wasn't Taurus or the Gemini twins, that's later. I know it wasn't Aries. Anyways, I'm not going to go super deep into that. That's some shit that happens. The Enclave base is some shit that happens. That's when Lighthose is introduced, but I don't think Gloria is there for that. And then 15 is when she gets the flank. 16 is the ending. So it's 11, 12, 13, 14. One of those is late. And also, I think Leo is when Rampage is introduced. So I think that's a little bit later when she's by herself. I think that's after the Enclave. because I think even when Blackjack gets separated, it's not like, hey, I'm gonna go do this shit on my own. Like they're on a mine cart. I think while she's on the cart, it just kind of goes flying. That might be after they get to Chapel. Again, I'm not super sure. I'm just kind of trying to spitball to remember what happens. Anyways, that's the basic plot of Ante Up. 20 minutes down. Hell yeah. So now let's start talking about the characters. Starting, of course, with old Blackjack herself. To me, this chapter is kind of on that borderline between being an amazing Blackjack chapter and a bad Jack chapter. I think overall there's more good Jack than bad Jack, but there's moments where I'm like, this is the part of the character I don't like. So I'm going to start with the good. Number one, we get that scene when Blackjack is in her own head and she's seeing a bunch of different people she knows asking her, what do you want? And it's like her mom, she's like, I want to play. I think it's the Overmare. And then she's like, I want revenge. And then when she sees Glory, it's, I want the truth. When she sees P21, she says, I want you. And at one point, she's like, I want love. I want this. And at the end of all that, with all these different answers, the last part is Blackjack asking herself, what do you want? And there's no answer. And I just find that really, like, this is the kind of introspective shit that personally I love. I love characters, like, talking to their reflection and trying to figure shit out. I love characters being, to a degree, I guess, like, haunted by people they know and that they've lost and having conversations with them and trying to figure out, why am I having this conversation? Like, what is, like, my brain trying to tell me from this? Like, I love shit like that. And I like I said, I really like this part of it. I have described Blackjack as having a very inconsistent morality in the first few chapters of the story, and I stand by that. And it's definitely something that she's kind of ironed out in these last few and is trying to stick with it. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But it is also a good question that Blackjack doesn't seem to really know what her goal is. I've got this thing on my wrist. Where is it? Right there. This is the pip book. I guess I'm doing this, but I don't really have a direction or a goal. It's just, I've got it. I might as well find out what it is. There's this Sanguine asshole. I want to meet him and kick his ass, but I don't even know if I want to kill him anymore. And by the time she gets there, she doesn't. What do I want? Like a few days ago, I saw the stars, and they were the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. I experienced love, like real, genuine love. That's really what Blackjack wants. Like, knowing where the story goes, and, like, because I remember she has this vision, and not like a That's So Raven kind of vision, but it's like, here's her fantasy. It's growing old, I believe in the Star House, with P21 and Glory, and them living their lives together in peace. And for Blackjack, like, I have to save the world and make it a safer, better place so this shit can happen. I am willing, though, to do whatever it takes and to sacrifice myself for those two to make it and be happy. And given the fact that both of them die, she doesn't get it. And there's, I guess in the lucidity lens, there's maybe something you can kind of, like, look into that of, what does Blackjack really want then? She just wants stability. She wants to get to a point where she can live her life without fear of her trauma and experience real, genuine love without having to be afraid or second guess somebody's intentions. And the two people she loves most, the people that represent her anger and her innocence, aren't there by the end. It's kind of really interesting to me. But there's that. Another part of the good is, like I was kind of saying, the mine operator. Blackjack lets him go. It's another example in the story where she has a chance to do better, and she takes the option to do better. When she says here, I'm not an executioner, I actually kind of believe her, because it feels like it's not just lip service and shit that she's saying. She's kind of standing on that business. And there's a genuine weight to her words now. She didn't kill him. She didn't kill Rose. She didn't kill the ponies in Stockyard. Red isn't dead anymore. And we are seeing real, genuine change from her character. We also get the introduction of the dealer. The way the dealer is first introduced, it is not some like, I was alive 200 years ago and here's the shit I know, blackjack, this is why ponies suck and blah, blah, blah. He's just this bony old reaper dealing out cards and be like, all right, ante up. Ooh, bad hand. Let's try again. Ante up. And it's so fucking cool. Blackjack's cutie mark. I don't know. Well, you can see it, but the queen and the ace, like it's cards. It's a good hand in blackjack. It's gambling. And for her, especially in this chapter, when she's like, I've been out here for like a week and I've killed so many people. It's like they are just chips on a table. Like, especially because, again, for her, at the start of her story, she's like, I don't really see death as death. They're just kind of here today and then gone tomorrow, and I don't think about it. And now there's weight to them. There's stakes. There's something to lose. But I still am so fast and loose with other people's lives. They're just chips. And if I get a good hand, I have good luck, I can win the hand. I can save them. And if I have bad luck and a bad hand, then they're gone. And I just have to keep upping the ante. Because the stakes never get... like, there's always the escalation. I love that. I love him being... I know he's supposed to be a reflection of the wasteland as a whole. And I don't think that's entirely wrong. But to me, he feels like very personally, this is just Blackjack's conscience. And it's such a cool representation of a conscience. Like, in terms of how he's first presented, 10 out of 10. No notes. It's fantastic. But I did say there was some bad Jack. Let's talk about the bad Jack. You've got, after the Lancer kills the zebras, which he didn't kill them all. There was 2 he saved. His mom and his sister. I don't think they say here that Sakashi is his mom, but it is. Blackjack is saying, just save one. I just need to save one. Like, can I not save one fucking person? And I get it. She just did all this shit, and she saw a bunch of people die in front of her, and she feels responsible. Get to that in a second. But I'm also kind of sitting here going, okay, you see, the rest of the mine, right? And the rest of the slaves. You did save one. You saved a lot, actually, Blackjack. You saved Glory. When you met her, that's one. Those ponies in Stockyard that you didn't kill, that is someone you saved. When Rose and her homies, I guess, like, had all those slaves, you saved them. When you got to Stockyard, you saved those Crusaders. I understand it can be really easy to emphasize the negative. Like, there's this movie, I think it's called The Guardian, with, I want to say, Ashton Kutcher and either Dustin Hoffman, or like Kevin Costner, which are 2 weird people to get confused. Like, I want to say it's Costner, but I also want to say it's Hoffman. But anyways, point. I believe it's about like the Coast Guard and like divers and the people they save and shit. And the scene I remember is the young guy is like, hey man, like, what's your number? You know, you've worked here a really long time. And, you know, my number's like 23 or some shit. And then the older guy, I don't remember his number. I want to say it's like 17 or 37. I feel like there was a 7 in there. And he's like 37. Oh, really? Like, you know, you've been here so long. I thought your number would have been much higher, like all the people you saved. And the guy tells him, those are the amount of people I lost. To me, it's the only number that actually matters. And I feel like that's kind of what Blackjack is supposed to be. Like, she's not seeing all the good she does, which is also kind of the point. It's kind of what Sakashi gets onto her about later. It's, you don't see the good you do. You only focus on the negative. But there is a lot of positive. As a reader, it's something that for me can get annoying very fast. When a character... it's why I say this chapter is kind of on the border. With Blackjack thinking about the dealer and the way she kind of plays with people's lives and shit, and her after realizing that Sakashi and her daughter survived, she's like, that's 2 chips you're not getting, you son of a bitch. Like, I really like those kinds of moments. But then her going, I'm a failure, I suck, I need to just die, it would have been way better if I never came out here. And all the ponies here are like, no, you kind of fucking saved us, dude. Thanks. It doesn't work for me. And then also when she's talking to P21, P21's like, dude, this was my fault because I knew Lancer was bad news. Saw the way he looked at the slaves. I could have stopped it. And then Blackjack's like, dude, fuck you for having guilt about that. That is not your fault. Oh, you thought maybe he was gonna do something. You didn't know what he was gonna do. You're not responsible. I'm responsible because I didn't know what he was gonna do and I could have stopped it. And the hypocrisy genuinely seems completely lost on her. It's not like she says this shit and then kind of thinks, huh, maybe this isn't my fault. Like, it's a shitty thing that happened, but it's not my fault that it happened. Scoodle is my fault. And I need to be better at that kind of shit. And, you know, going forward, maybe I should try to be more questioning. I should be more discerning to make sure shit like this doesn't happen. Because I want to stop it if I can. But it's not my fault. Would have been great. But instead you get her going, no, it is my fault. It's totally on me. Fuck my life. I'm like, this is the shit that annoys me. Because this is the Blackjack I remember. Especially in some of the later parts of the story. And there are points, though, where I'm like, yeah, you know, you did spare that person and they did all this shit. This kind of is your fault, Blackjack, but... There's good Jack and there's bad Jack. This is a more bad than good, but I feel like the bad Jack elements are recurring throughout the story. Then we get some of the lucidity lens shit, which I kind of talked about a little bit ago when I was spitballing. There's this line that she has where she's talking about how, like, I don't want to become the wasteland. I don't want to become one of these people that just hurts and kills and is evil. The way she says it, like, I wrote the line down, I copied it, was, or was it just the wasteland trying to wiggle its way inside me and crush whatever good remained inside? I hated the way that was phrased. I hated how sexual that sounded. I'm like, that makes sense from the lucidity lens and what Blackjack went through and what she sees the wasteland as and all the sexual violence that's in the wasteland and the fact that even in chapter 1 she's like, man, I would literally rather die than be raped. It makes sense. She sees this world, even though this is how she's trying to process her trauma, but she sees the world around her as something constantly trying to violate her. It's so uncomfortable. It's so interesting, though. And again, this is why I say, I'm like, as much as I feel like at times, like, I gotta be reaching for this. Like, I can see it here in the text. Of course, like, there's confirmation bias. But there's a lot in the text that I'm using as confirmation bias. To a point where this has to be intentional, right? Like, him writing it as, like, the wasteland trying to violate her. Like, is that just foreshadowing of what happens at the end of 33? Is this just because he was trying to write a really grimdark fucking story, and he's like, what's more grimdark than rape everywhere? Or was it very, very intentional? Because I think, like, when I was flipping through Lucidity the other day, I was looking at his notes, and I think he was saying in his notes, like, I nearly cut this chapter, but I didn't want to, and, like, one of my editors was like, no, you need to keep it, because it's, like, really good and really interesting. It kind of makes me wonder, then, was he thinking about cutting Lucidity because this wasn't something he was thinking of, and he was just like, I don't know, like, it was kind of a cool idea, but it doesn't add much? Was he thinking about cutting it because it made the whole thing too obvious? Or he's like, this is what I want to do, but I don't know if I should actually go through with it because people might hate it. Like, I genuinely don't know. But the more I reread Project Horizons and I see all of these little things that just keep adding up, like, this can't be a coincidence anymore. This is weird. But, that's Blackjack for this chapter. Now we get to P2-1. So, as I was saying in chapter 7 or 8, I don't remember, this was the chapter where it really clicked with me. He represents Blackjack's anger, but I think it's a little bit more than that. It's not just her anger. If Glory is her innocence before the incident, P2-1 represents the trauma after the incident. You've got him feeling worthless. It's something he talks about in an earlier chapter. He's like, this is why I decided to start using explosives. You know, it takes control, it takes calm. But if I don't have any kind of weapon, I feel like I'm useless and I'm dead weight, and I don't want to do that. You have him in the stable where he wanted to learn things. He's like, I want to learn arcane sciences. I want to learn the computers. I want to learn a lockpick because I don't want to be useless. I don't want to just be a sex slave. I don't want people to see me only as a sex object. That makes a lot of fucking sense. You've got him here after the slaves just going like, I feel useless because I could have stopped this. I could have stopped him from betraying you, and I didn't. I'm a failure. I could have stopped him from hurting innocent people, and I didn't. I'm a failure. That's kind of interesting. Which we also see is just a recurring element for him whenever it is slaves. He has to save the slaves here. He has to save his fellow males in 99. He has to save the ones in Fallen Arch. And every time he fails, that sense of worthlessness and that weight just keeps adding and adding and just crushing him. It kind of makes me wonder if, I guess here, like, again, not, like, knowing Lancer's intent and not doing anything about it, kind of makes me wonder if this is, like, Blackjack knew what Steel Rain was going to do. She could see the intent, but didn't stop it. Like, she didn't keep, like, a buddy with her. She didn't tell anybody. She didn't try to protect herself. And I don't know, because again, I don't really know what the relationship was. I don't know if this was her boyfriend who took advantage of her, if this was a friend, if it was just a classmate that they weren't particularly close. Like, how deep was that betrayal? Because it's a deep-cutting betrayal regardless, either way. But if this was someone that she knew and trusted and loved, it's even worse. There's the feelings of worthlessness. There's the feelings of anger. Here he's advocating for justice, and to him, justice is revenge. If people do something to my friend, their life is forfeit. If someone does something to Blackjack, they're gone because of what they did to you in reality, what they did to me. They don't deserve to live after that. You want to be just, you want to be better, you make an example and you make sure that no one has to go through this shit again. No one has to experience what you went through, Blackjack. And it makes a lot of sense to me. And again, at face value, he which is interesting. Usually I kind of go the other way. It's like face value is the lucidity lens. But I feel like at face value, like, again, it makes sense. He was a slave. He wants to be seen as just more than that. Which is why he doesn't want to feel useless. That's why he wants to take up all these other tasks. Sorry, let me drink some water real quick. My throat's super dry. 40 minutes. We haven't even gotten to the Marauders yet, baby. This is gonna be a long video. Because he was a slave, again, it makes sense that he's always so passionate about saving them. And like I was saying, every time he fails, it just hits him that much harder. I feel like him having Blackjack push the button because he offers it, for him, it's a genuine moment of trust and friendship. Like, hey, Blackjack, this guy needs to die. He's a slave owner. You've killed so many shitty people. You killed some slavers the other day, and you're like, slavery is the worst. I'll stop it all. Clearly, you want to do this. And you know what? As your friend, because we've established now that we are friends, sorry to tell the time. Okay, we're Gucci. I want to give you the honor of pushing the button. And her not only refusing, not only strongly advocating against it, but basically telling him to his face, you're fucking evil for wanting to do this, and you asking me to do this is a violation of my trust in you, was just a giant slap in the face from her. And I like that. It's like, hey, we're friends now, right? You want to kill this guy? No. And because they even kind of made a mention that at the end of the chapter, like, he's kind of moodier than usual around Blackjack. And I don't remember how this affects their relationship in the next few chapters, especially because from what I remember, they're separated for a good chunk of it. But you know he's pissed. It makes sense. Then we get Glory. We get Glory doing her best to save Blackjack in the surgery. We get, like I was saying, the backstory. I hate Rainbow Dash because I think she's an idiot because she went purely on emotions and not on logic. She didn't really think things through, and it fucked up everyone else. We hear a little bit about her family. We hear about her being an ace medic and all that, and her supervisor and her mentor believing in her, and it led to the fight. Said all that shit earlier. Under the lucidity lens, I mentioned P21 is very... in chapter 2, when I was talking about P21, I was like, I think he's supposed to be a teacher or a guide or a counselor, some shit like that. Someone who is trying to help her, and Blackjack deliberately ignoring his advice and basically being like, no, fuck you, you don't tell me what to do with Scootle. I was going to say in chapter 3, but technically it's chapter 4. Anyways, no. Chapter 4 was Glory. Hold up. No. Chapter 5 was Glory. No, chapter 5 was that. That's right, because I think they meet Scootle at the end of chapter 2. She gets ripped asunder in chapter 3. Chapter 4 is when they meet Glory. Chapter 5 is when they start questing. Chapter 6 is play. We got it. We're remembering the shit we read not too long ago. Anyways, point. If P21 is someone giving advice that she trusts, and then Blackjack spurned that, and Glory represents another part of Blackjack, again, this might just be a pure coincidence, but it might kind of be another reflection of that. With someone telling her, you should not do this, because it's going to be dangerous, you might get hurt, and her saying, no, fuck you, I'm going to do what I want to do, and getting hurt as a result of spurning that advice. It's another interesting coincidence. And again, this is another incidence of Blackjack being saved by her innocence. Again, there's no one really else that could. Glory's the only medic. But it is just, if this is what Glory represents, this is kind of the thing that's keeping her tied. And it is interesting that her sense of innocence is saying, I don't want to be here. I think it was a mistake coming into this world. I'm not okay. Just a lot of shit I find really interesting. So now that we're almost 45 minutes in, which is about as long as some of the longer videos, now I get to talk about Macintosh's Marauders, and there's a lot here. I feel like I should start by saying I love the idea of the Marauders. The original story's pre-war story was about politics. It's about the main six and what happened to them, like what drove them to doing the shit they did during the war, how far they went, the prices they paid for it. It is a political story, and I think it rules. Like, I like the main six storyline more or less about as much as I love the Little Pip storyline. It's fantastic. Horizon said, we're also going to have a political storyline with Golden Blood and the projects, but what if we show a lot more of the war from this perspective of a soldier? We'll get some orbs of them actually fighting and some of the conflict and the combat, but we'll also get to see what happened to them after. This is what it was like for the veterans and how they were able to cope, or in the case of someone like Jetstream or Psalm, how they were not able to cope. And I think that's a really, really good idea. The problem I have, I'm going to go into the individuals here in a second, but for me, it's like the idea is great. But the way a lot of these characters tie into the story, or in the case of like Jetstream, the way she doesn't tie into the big story, a lot of them I'm just like, man, I don't actually like this. The idea is good. Like the base idea is good. Part of the idea for your character is good. But what they actually do with it, I'm like, I don't like this. I think you kind of made the story a little, not all of them actively make it worse, but I don't know if they necessarily make it better. I honestly feel like the way the Marauders are written, and again, the way they're like woven into the main narrative, for me, it doesn't add the way that, for the most part, the projects do. To me, it just kind of distracts. I'm like, really? This one also fucking survived. This one also survived the war. Like, all but like 3 of them are fucking dead. Or excuse me, the other way around, and I'm not a huge fan. So, getting into the specifics, there's 9 of them. This is gonna take a little bit. Number 1, we start with Big Macintosh. He's the war hero. He's the good soul who kept his team together, and although Stonewing was their first loss, it was Big Macintosh's loss and his death that was really the death knell for the group. I think they even kind of say, it's like, yeah, after that happened, we weren't really a unit anymore. He's what kept us together. He was our strength, our anchor. And with him gone, we kind of all lost our way and were scattered to the winds. And, well, none of us were really okay afterwards. The way his death is written, in the original story, it was Celestia was going to get assassinated, and Big Macintosh, like, jumped in the way. He took the bullet. He's a goddamn war hero. What happens in Horizons is Psalm, one of his party members, is the one that's tasked with assassinating Celestia. And I don't remember who gave it to her. It was probably Golden Blood. I don't think it was Luna. I think it really was Golden Blood. I mean, like, hey, I think her trying to negotiate peace is a bad idea. Let's take care of it. And maybe I'm shitting on Golden Blood for something he didn't do, which is surprising to think there was something in the story he didn't do. But Psalm lines it up. Big Macintosh sees her. Sure, I guess his eyes are that sharp. And he steps in front of the barrel, like in between her and Celestia, and he's just like smiling at her. I don't remember if he says something like Psalm's reading his lips, but the vibe is, you're my friend, and I know you're a good person. I know you have your doubts because you've killed a lot of people. You know, every time she's shooting, she's like, forgive me, Celestia, for I have sinned. Forgive me, Luna, for I have sinned. Like, I know you don't think you're a good person, but you are. I know the person you really are, Psalm. You're not going to pull that trigger. You're not going to pull that trigger when I'm in front of you. And it's meant to be this moment of, like, a soul too good for this sinful earth who wasn't ready for the wasteland or what the war could really be. A poor bastard who at this point genuinely still believed that friendship was magic, and it cost him his life. That's the idea. The way it's always read to me is more of a quote from Man Stabbed. What are you gonna do? Stab me? Like, him taking the bullet is a wonderful, heroic moment. Him stepping in front of it and going, dude, I know you're not gonna oh, and dying is always unintentionally funny to me. I get the idea. It can be something that works, but for me, I'm just kind of go, you took a war hero and you just kind of made him stupid. Good job. Next on the list is Apple Snack, who, if you've read the original, you know him better as Steel Hooves, and he doesn't really do anything. He's not really a member of the Marauders. He kind of gets mentioned a few times. It's even a while before they, like, really reveal, like, oh yeah, it's him. He's just here because Steel Hooves was in the original story, and he was friends with Big Macintosh. It's like, hey, if I'm using Big Macintosh, I guess I gotta use Apple Snack too, and for that reason, I don't think it should have been Big Macintosh that died. If it had been, or excuse me, I do like the idea of this team losing their leader and their emotional center, and then everything goes to shit. But if you're gonna ruin my man being a war hero and make it something stupid, and then you have to add another character that you don't do anything with, and I'm almost kind of glad nothing's really done with Steel Hooves, knowing Project Horizons, it really could have done some bad shit. It might have just been better, like, let's cut Steel Hooves and let's make Big Macintosh like an OC. I mean, season 3 wasn't out, so you're probably not doing, like, I mean, that's the question after season 3. You're not doing, like, a Flash Sentry thing if you want to do a Twilight ship with a canon character. I don't know. Season 2 wasn't out yet, or wasn't finished, so it couldn't have been, like, Shining Armor. And granted, you're not going to ship Shining Armor with Twilight Sparkle. But Shining Armor's Marauders goes, like, kind of hard, and I don't know. I don't know. I'm not a fan of how Big Mac is used, and Apple Snack isn't really used at all. There's kind of no point. With Stonewing, his thing is he ends up being Gorgon's true identity, and it shows what Project Chimera is all about. And the idea of Project Chimera is kind of cool. I took a pony, and I took an alligator, and now it's a Ponygator. I took a cockatrice, and I took a Pegasus, and it's a Gorgon now. That's, like, fun. I like that kind of shit. There's a part of me that's like, I think it would have been a little bit cooler if it wasn't a project. It's like, this is just shit that happened, and some of the radiation, like, Huffington was so fucked this happened. I'm not really gonna shit on it for that. I think it's kind of cool. My problem is I don't care enough about Stonewing for this to matter to me. Gorgon is a cool fucking monster. Like, chapter 9, I think, is overall, like, okay. But the fight with Gorgon and him just turning people into stone by just looking at him, the way Blackjack convinces him to not turn her into stone is cool. The Rock Crusher is one of the coolest kills of the whole story. Amazing monster, like 10 out of 10, no notes. I was like, oh yeah, but he's got a sad backstory that you find out way later after he's dead. And is it sad? Yeah, I'm not going to say it's not. But Stonewing leaves, like, no impact. Even in this chapter where you get to know the Marauders, got to see them interact, I felt like I got kind of nothing out of him. So I'm not like, no, he's dead. It's like, oh, Stonewing, that's right. I kind of remember him now, and that doesn't really do it for me. Then we get my baby girl. We get Jetstream. So Jetstream is so interesting to me. So her thing is later, after Stonewing died, because that was her best friend, that was the love of her life, she was so consumed with grief that she had a surgery. She had the eternal sunshine of the spotless mind surgery done to erase Stonewing from her memories. So that way she could be happy and not, like, she could live without that loss. Because he was so integral, though, to her life and to her memory, instead of it just being like, cool, I can start again, she could tell that something was wrong and something was missing, and it drove her nuts. And her grief from the war and the loss fucked her up for life to the point where she ends up going into a mental institution. That is interesting. That is like, this is what happened to a soldier because of what happened, like what they saw and experienced on the battlefield. And we also did some cool, crazy magic shit to make it, I don't know, friendship is magic, but like to make it more of a fantasy. This is really cool and I love it. Here's my one problem. Lacune. The word lacune, or like lacuna, means that something is missing. Like if you find an old ancient tome and there's the last page is missing, that is the lacune or the lacuna. It is that missing piece. When I met Lacune and saw her name, and it was like, oh, the missing piece. This is Jetstream, because she's missing so much. That's what Stonewing is. Like, there is this part of her that's just gone and missing. And with her whole thing of being the dumping ground of the goddess, like every negative emotion, every negative quality, we're putting it into someone else. The idea of it going into someone else who has so much of themselves just gone means like, yeah, Jetstream probably has, I don't know if this really makes sense, but it kind of makes sense to me, because so much of her is missing. She kind of has more room than the average person to fit this shit in. And because she's been so desperate to find that missing piece again, she's probably a lot more willing to take on this extra shit. Even if it is all negative emotions and it's doubt and depression. And isn't that ironic that she got rid of Stonewing to not feel this shit anymore, but because she's gone, she's so desperate to find anything and to feel anything that she'll take all of that shit she was feeling in the first place and amplify it to like 100 or 1,000 for every one of these fucking alicorns. This is so fucking interesting. Yo! What do you mean it's Psalm? Why? What do you mean? It was so perfectly set up for Jetstream. What? I was not happy when I found out it wasn't Jetstream. And it's just, like I said, to me, it felt so perfectly set up for this fascinating character. And then just, no, I'm not gonna do that. It's an interesting setup, and I'm just gonna leave it at the setup. Very well. Let's continue down the list. Next, we get Vanity. He's the only one I don't have shit to say about, actually. I mean, yeah, he's a soldier, but he's like a higher ranking officer because he's related to royalty, so he ends up going into politics. And you get his relationship with his brother, which is really bad because his brother is Blue Blood, a jealous piece of shit. And his relationship with his nephew Golden Blood, which is actually pretty good, and one of the few people Golden Blood seem to actually kind of like. You get Duty and Sacrifice, which, as I've said before, thematically representing Blackjack and Little Pip, I think is really fucking cool, and I love it when Blackjack gets those guns. He has a relationship with Rarity, and there's that part of me that goes, this is the third, I don't know what the order is, it's like, really? Another Ministry Mayor that's being set up with one of your OCs? Like, we're doing this, but I like the guy, and I think his relationship and interactions with Rarity are actually good and cool and interesting. And I'm like, no, like, this is the one character that I think really works. And because he's dead and not part of, like, the bigger plot and all the projects and shit, I'm like, yeah, there's no bullshit later where I'm like, man, I really don't like this character or what they did with you. I'm like, no, you actually fucking rule, dude. Good shit. Now we're on number 6. Now we're on Psalm. Yay. So, here's the thing. I love Psalm's character. I hate her impact on the story. The idea of, the deeply religious soldier, especially a sniper, someone who has to kill, who really feels the weight of every life she's taken, is always something I find super interesting. She's very similar to Blackjack, I think, because they both have these very lengthy list of regrets. They see themselves as these monsters, they see themselves as these killers, and I think it makes for an interesting connection. And you see her being torn between her religion and her love for the gods versus the duty that she actually has, and how it tears her apart. And then there's the loyalty to my country, but the loyalty to my friends, and what she ends up choosing, and how it ruins all of those relationships. Like, it's good, interesting shit. Here's what I don't like. I already brought up killing Big Macintosh, and I'm like, no, I think the idea is there, but I think the way it's presented, again, feels less of, I did this horrible thing and I killed one of my best friends who believed in me and trusted me and I let him down, and more of a, no, Big Macintosh just did something stupid and he paid for it. And I don't see that as tragic anymore. I just see that as like, you know what, Big Mac, you played a stupid game, you won a stupid prize. Her killing Pinkie Pie as part of Project Party Pooper is not, to me, the most egregious fuck the original story and everything it stood for moment. That's Calamity saying, kinda makes you miss Party Time Mentos, huh? Boy, we'll get to that when we get to Arc 4. This is up there, because to me, Little Pip finding out how Pinkie died, and how she ruined her life, and her mental state, and her friendships, by being addicted to drugs, because the drugs made the Pinkie sense work better, and the Pinkie sense is what allowed her to suss people out and like try to stop the war and stop all the crazy shit. And that moment when Pinkie is writing to Twilight and saying, I want to do better, I want to like be friends with everybody again, and I know I fucked up and I know the way people see me and it's not wrong, but I'm so close. I am so close to saving us and stopping this. When I do, I am checking myself into rehab. I am fixing myself. And if you can, I want you to be there with me, because I want one of my friends there. I want someone to keep me accountable, because I don't trust myself not to. I need you all, but you have to trust me that I need to do this. And I'm so close, and she just misses it, and she pays for it in fire, and wow, that fucking hits hard. In Horizons, it's Psalm's like, well, I have a job, it's Project Party Pooper, I gotta kill all the really important people because Golden Blood told me to, let me just set up my gun. And then Pinkie's sense goes off and she sees Psalm and it's just like, yeah, take the shot, please don't let me burn, I don't want to die in the fire. I'm like, wow, I don't know, I thought the fact that she died in that fire was fucking meaningful, but sure, let's just give Psalm more good death ideas to fuck up. It's not like she can fuck up anything else. And then we get to Lockene, and I think Jetstream is way better suited for the jobs. Let me talk about that just real fucking quick. Lockene as a character, I referred to her when reading the story the first time as Madame Le Plot Device, because I didn't think she fucking had a character. I've talked a lot about how much I love the relationships between the Sentinels, and it's my favorite aspect of Project Horizons. The way Blackjack interacts with P21 and Gloria and later Scotch and Rampage, and the way they interact with each other, they feel like real people in that regard. Like, obviously they're fictional fucking ponies, but the interactions and the connections feel genuine, and they're really good and interesting. And then you have Lockene, who doesn't really have that with the rest of the cast. It's just kind of Blackjack. And even then, I never thought their connection was particularly strong. I found her really boring and really lacking in a character. You would think someone who has all these different people inside of them, all these negative qualities, they'd almost be kind of fighting for control, and you'd see Lockene at one point just like slipping into negative Twilight or slipping into negative Trixie. And maybe it's something that she can actively use, but it doesn't happen. Instead, that character arc goes to Rampage. I'll get to that when I talk about Rampage, but spoiler alert, I don't like it, like, at all. The Angel will get a pass, but the rest of them not really. It's like, this should have been Lockene's thing. What the hell? Why wasn't this Jetstream? Like, the idea makes it so interesting, and it just doesn't work. Next we get Twist, or like, speaking of Rampage, Twist just doesn't do it for me. I don't remember much of what she did or contributed. She's part of the Phoenix Talisman. Like I said, when I get to Rampage, I'll explain why I fucking hate the way the Phoenix Talisman works. There's her role in Deuce's backstory, which I really fucking hate. More sexual violence, yay. And also, I'll talk about why I don't like it for Deuce here in a second. I remember kind of some aspects of her character, like she was like this kung fu wizard by the end, and there was her relationship with a zebra, which was that shit. And I remember it being kind of cool and interesting, but I think it also like took a while to get there. And it's not the worst. I think that shit is okay, but how she fits into Deuce's backstory, I fucking hate. The Phoenix Talisman aspect, I fucking hate. Her being Rampage's mom is fine, but again, the context of it, I don't like it. So let's talk about Deuce's. Here's the thing. I love Deuce. I love this looming threat that Blackjack is constantly trying to escape and outwit at the start of the story. I love how he's near impossible to take down. I love how his love of sex is this warped reflection of Blackjack's sex obsession that, again, you really don't get in chapter 1. Like, she kind of talks about it a little bit. It feels like later in the story, sex is like all she'll think about. That's not quite true. But it's a lot bigger, and Deuce is a reflection of that, and him also being this manifestation of her trauma that is constantly following her that she's unable to escape. Doof, on the other hand, it's an attempt to make him sympathetic, and it's the reason okay, we're at 15%. We're running out of power. Let's see if I can actually finish this video on time. So, Doof is an attempt to make him sympathetic because the reason the rape of Twist happened and Rampage ends up being born is partly because he was too stupid to know that it was wrong. Because someone else is like, hey, you really like her, right? Yeah. And it makes you sad that she doesn't like you. Yeah. Well, she does like you. That's how everyone is. I mean, she's playing a game. Tell you what, just, you know what she wants? She just wants it. You gotta give it to her. And if she tells you to stop, that's just more code. It just means keep going. I'm like, I hate this. This is so uncomfortable. This is not fun to read. It's not interesting. And it takes this dude, and again, it feels like it's trying to make it seem like he's sympathetic. Like, almost like it's like the M'Naughton test or the Durham test, I don't remember, but he's not guilty for what he did because of insanity, because it's trying to make it seem like he genuinely didn't know what he was doing was wrong, so we should feel bad for him. Now, he still did a bad thing, of course, but I mean, look at what happened to him. He went to prison, he got turned into a metal dude and shit. Don't you feel bad for him? No, fuck him. What a piece of shit. I don't feel like, why are you trying to make me feel bad for him? Not like this. This feels really warped and twisted, and not in a good way where I'm like, ugh, this is neat, and like, ew, stop. And then we get Echo. Echo leaves no impression, which is kind of supposed to be the point of his character, but it also means it works a little too well because I don't know Echo as a person. Again, him being the dealer, it's an interesting idea for Blackjack to have this companion who's been around forever. In a sense, that's kind of what Lakane is anyways. But someone who's been around, has seen all this shit, blah, 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 blah. Kind of like her version of Steel Hooves. But the dealer is already done so perfectly as her conscience that, hey, now we're making him a character, and all the metaphysical shit that he was representing, that's not actually what he is. He's this dude. And then at the end of the story, just kidding, he was both. Why? Just ugh. So that's the Marauders. Getting into the big picture moments, Blackjack at one point mentions not having use of her legs. It's definitely not going to be the last time. There's her legs get fucked up in the tunnel. There's 33. There's her struggling to walk after getting the new legs. Then she has to get the upgrades. Happens a lot. At one point, Blackjack describes Sanguine as a broker, as a middleman, and not kind of like the main guy running shit. I'm like, that's actually not inaccurate, because he is basically the broker for cogs. We do, like I said, the first appearance of the dealer. It is before EC 1101 gets decrypted. I also think that, in a way, it's kind of neat that the first chapter we see Echo with the Marauders is the first time we meet the dealer. We start the Marauder storyline, Blackjack getting her mind bullets, Black Glory implying a member of her family is a Dashite because that's Dawn, that's her mom. There's this one exchange between Deuce and Twist where he says some shit. She's like, eat this, fuckers, or some shit. And then Twist's like, you kiss your mother with that mouth? And then he goes, I'd kiss yours. And I'm like, oh, I know how this goes. Oh, I hated that. There's another mention of the Angel of Death, and they mention Officer Softheart, which is another part of the Phoenix Talisman. Blackjack taking Buck again, so the drug addiction arc is coming up. P21 is able to remove the bomb collars from the slaves without incident. And I'm like, yeah, this time he was able to do it without incident. He might not be so lucky in Fallen Arch there, buddy. We get Sakashi being introduced. Lancer didn't kill her, and that is intentional on his part. She tells Blackjack one of her funny stories, and it is, again, one about, essentially, Blackjack, you don't understand the good you're doing because you only focus on the bad. You should probably listen when people tell you do good things, too. But also, she talks about the Remnant, and, like, they're fighting because of this evil king who is just wanted violence. It was kind of crazy, and, like, what an idiot. I think it's foolish, so I laugh. And, yeah, she's talking about Amadi, and she knows Amadi pretty fucking well. I think that's really cool. In terms of the catchphrase count, Red is Dead is at 6. I don't think we'll be going up much more. I'm not an executioner, gotta use. It's at 2. Security saves is still at 1. Not a Smart Pony is at 12. Annie Up is finally used. The scene when she's talking to the dealer at, like, the actual dealing shit, it's said, like, 7 times. Reading it, I think Blackjack got 3 of them. I don't think they were all on the dealer. Maybe I'm misreading that, but that's how I see it. And then she says it one more time in the chapter, so I'm putting it at 4 to start with. And as for her kill count, like I said earlier, I don't want to do an overall kill count anymore because I don't think it quite... The story, the way it's written, isn't conducive to that, but I can count Blackjack's. Blackjack had 1. That was Tumbleweed. I forgot to write her total, but I think she's at like 98 or something like that. So I think she's falling a bit behind of the average needed to hit 1,000. We'll see what happens, but that was that chapter. This was a long one. We're done.